light plastic bags. Although the report adopted by ENVI confirms a pragmatic vision towards circular economy, the rapporteur is well aware that there are still differences between the positions adopted in the different committees of this House. With the amendment tabled by my group, the rapporteur wanted to take a further step towards a common, balanced position on the most controversial aspects of the text. First, on the reuse aspect, Article 26, in addition to the removal of targets for the takeaway sector already adopted by the ENVI committee, the rapporteur proposes that economic operators with a packaging recycling rate of over 85% to be exempted from the reuse obligation, striking a balance between increasing targets and simply eliminating them. Secondly, with regards to the restrictions of certain packaging formats for the fruit and vegetables, that's Annex 5, line 2, the rapporteur wishes to respond to Agri's concerns by extending the scope of the packaging format still authorized to single-use plastic-free composite packaging so that producers can continue to have a wider choice of alternatives. Lastly, with regard to packaging restrictions for the HoReCa sector, that's Annex 5, line 3, the text adopted in ENVI is already well-balanced. A complete derogation for micro-enterprises, a 3-year deferral for applications of the measures on flexibility granted to the member states. However, in a spirit of compromise, the rapporteur wanted to add wrappers, that they would be exempted from the ban, as it would be difficult to replace them with other alternatives. This set of amendments is for the rapporteur the middle ground that only reconciles positions between groups, landing a robust text at the beginning of interinstitutional negotiations. On her behalf, I would like to thank all the colleagues for the cooperation we have had so far, and I'm looking forward to represent this House in the further negotiations with the co-legislature. So thank you. Then I changed my hat because I think there was an understanding that I would have also 1 minute for myself, because then the combination would sort of... I try to keep it to 30 seconds. And I just state then that one of the problems we had was the, and I probably changed to Finnish, meidän todellinen...
A real problem was life cycle analysis. That can be done in many different ways, even small changes. How many wash cycles, how much water, how much energy. Each of these changes the actual situation and changes the result of the life cycle analysis. So life cycle in the form that we got it from the Commission gave us problems that we couldn't get over, but we'll try to deal with that in future. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm sorry, we were not aware that you had your own hat for this debate. But we'll continue. On behalf of the ITRE committee, Patrizia Toia.
Thank you,
Madam President. Thank you, Commissioner. It's a great honour for me to represent the ITRE Commission, which has worked very hard on this measure. It's an even greater honour for me to be rapporteur for a committee which has had shared powers on a series of very important provisions. We think that overall this is positive. We very much share the objective of this regulation, which is to reduce packaging waste and packaging, and most of the measures included in it. We have tried to bring some changes in with a report voted on by a very large majority in ITRE, so as to ensure that we can conciliate the ambitious objectives set out by the Commission with reality, the opinions and observations, state-of-the-art research regarding the very many extremely good things in the report. so as not to penalise the excellent work which has been done in recent years to improve the quality of packaging, to ensure that packaging in the market is increasingly sustainable, to invest in recycling industries, innovative research. And I think it would have been unacceptable for the rest of the world if we hadn't followed up on that. It's important that we adopt the opinions of the Trade Committee. The problem is, however, that the lead committee simply disregarded all our positions. The speaker's been cut off.
Thank you. Now, we have another opinion on this report for the IMCO committee. Virginie Joron.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, chers collègues.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues. Now, on the one hand, we want to bring things from New Zealand, and on the other hand, we want to reduce packaging. So we're going to put a ban on all sorts of boxes and wrappings. But if I was a bureaucrat in Brussels, I'd also make sure that we reduced even more by bringing even more absurd rules in. If I was a bureaucrat, I wouldn't have steaks anymore. We could eat insects instead. I'd also put a ban on thermal cars and low-cost flying, and I'd also put a ban on Twitter and have general surveillance in place. And I would get rid of words like Mr., Mrs., and so on. He, she. This is how, camembert packaging is going to be banned because somebody went to Bali and saw some rubbish on the beach. Of course, recycling is good and plastic is useless. But we already have a law in France. So why don't we just let the French live freely in France and allow the Europeans to live freely in Europe? Thank you.
Thank you. For the Commission, I give the floor to Commissioner Sinkevičius.
Honourable members, thank you for this opportunity to address you today ahead of a vote that is crucial for our environment, our single market, our industries and our citizens. And let me start by thanking, first of all, the rapporteur, Ms. Ries, all shadow rapporteurs, the rapporteurs of the 3 opinion-giving committees, and the many of you who have I also met over the last months to discuss this proposal. Dear members of the Parliament, what we have on the table is a set of ambitious rules to take packaging on board our transition to climate neutrality and clean circular economy. If we are to reverse the ever-growing amounts of waste and increase resource efficiency in the packaging sector, then we have to be ready for a change. I'm convinced that this will be a change for the better. Packaging is a key sector where we can empower citizens to participate in the circular economy and help create new business opportunities. The measures we propose, they will deliver cost savings to consumers and benefits for the environment. The Commission has worked very closely with all stakeholders, all actors. We've listened to the full range of issues, concerns that have emerged. Some of you call for additional flexibility, in particular on reuse targets, mandatory deposit and return systems and waste prevention in general. However, harmonising Europe's packaging rules is a core objective of this initiative, reducing red tape, compliance costs and market barriers, taking full advantage of the EU single market. And I'm convinced that we can achieve the desired high level of harmonisation only if we keep the bar of our ambition high. The latest data on packaging waste show that we have broken a new sad record. Between 2010 and 2021, our packaging waste grew by more than 24%, faster than GDP and even faster than recycling capacities. In 2021 alone, we saw the highest increase in decade by 6% compared to 2020. So this surge in packaging waste is a clear sign of persisting wasteful trends in resource use. Driven by single use in the EU, we now generate almost 190 kilograms of packaging waste per person every year. So our proposal aims for efficiency gains in the recycling sector. the absolute volume of packaging waste for recycling will surely need to increase. But the clearly trends are showing, and please note it, recycling is not enough. Losses are inevitable at every stage of recycling change, and primary materials are constantly needed to complement what comes from the recycling waste. So we must do more to reduce the generation of packaging waste, more to replace single-use packaging with sustainable solutions, and help to roll out reuse or refill systems. Lastly, dear colleagues, let me recall our industries are united in their call for this regulation to come into force, supporting our single market. Our citizens, they expect decision from all of us, and they all say the earlier, the better. And the Commission agrees. Thank you.
Kiitokset, komissaari.
Thank you, Commissioner. And now for the Agri Committee, the opinion will be presented by Salvatore De Meo.
Grazie Presidente, signor Commissario.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. Tomorrow's vote on the packaging regulation is likely to undermine the credibility of the European Union. Everybody in Europe wants us to be more sustainable, less packaging, in other words, but we can't forget that this same Europe has, for many years now, promoted and supported research on recycling. It has also encouraged and trained citizens to sort their waste. We're now proposing the opposite, without actually thinking about the enormous results which have achieved in terms of recycling. What is likely now to become a parallel street, which undermines our credibility in the social, economic and ecological way. So let's think about the food industry. We need to be able to eat fresh, tasty and safe food without waste. If we are to do that, we can't run the risk of destroying whole industrial sectors which have an enormous impact on consumers. I would appeal to everybody on this. We have to ensure that we come back to common sense so as to ensure that our political choices and environmental choices be coherent and, above all, in the interest of our citizens.
Thank you. And now we'll hear the speakers from the groups. First of all, for the EPP group, Massimiliano Salini.
Grazie. Noi oggi abbiamo.
Thank you. Today, in Europe, we have an enormous quantity of waste derived from packaging. But the quantity, perhaps, isn't enough to justify the enormous extent of this legislation. The vast majority of packaging-related waste is adequately dealt with by the recycling industry. The risk we're running here is that this extremely complicated and cumbersome regulation will end up covering just 2% of the total volume of waste. It's not serious for us to devote so much time and money to regulations covering a sector which, and I'm talking about the food sector now, has already achieved an enormous amount. The results achieved by that sector have been quite extraordinary. Obviously, we haven't achieved the same results in all 27 member states. Some countries have made enormous progress in terms of recycling, others less so. Others have been more successful when it comes to reuse. The fact is, best recycling practice cannot be disregarded, which is something this regulation is trying to do. We're introducing a concept of recycling which has no scientific basis and which is not based on the major principles which we support and which we support in the negotiations on material neutrality. Closed-circuit recycling, for example, for high-quality recycling, is another issue which we have to deal with. There are some substances which can work within a closed-circuit, bottles to bottles, for example. When it comes to paper, the closed-circuit system simply does not work. You need a open cycle if we're to achieve high levels of recycling. So there are a whole system of cross-cutting issues here. First of all, the performance of individual countries. Secondly, protecting our recycling industry, which has achieved so much in terms of food safety and security. This is why we want these negotiations to come back, to have its feet on the ground and to recognise reality, as so many colleagues said. let's not simply disregard and throw away all this important research done in so many countries.
Thank you. Delara Burkhardt now for the S&D Group.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Colleagues, last week I had a talk with a 12-year-old schoolgirls, Alna and Sabina, in Düsseldorf. They were annoyed that in the fruit and vegetable section of the supermarket there was so much packaging. I asked myself what we could do about this. The reality that the girls are right. We use too much packaging. For example, to-go cafe or cucumbers or whatever it is. Since 2010, our consumption of packaging waste in the EU has grown by 20%. Every German amasses 225 kilograms of waste. That's the same as much as the weight of 3 washing machines. Many people in Europe are annoyed about this. A majority of people calling on us to reduce the mountain of waste. I hope that the voices of consumers will be heard in this House as certain experts. I have never been contacted by so many lobbyists. Some of this has been on the border of legality with pseudo-science, fake studies. They sow doubt, and they shouldn't be successful tomorrow. Tomorrow we can set the direction and we can reduce our consumption because we can't recycle our way out of our mountains of waste. We need rules about on excess packaging and rules on reuse. We can make packaging more sustainable. We can have a whole program for recycling because from 2030 all packaging must be recyclable and more recycled material must be in plastic material. We can avoid bisphenol and forever chemicals which come in contact with our food. Sabina and Anna, those girls, gave us hope that more people, more members would hear their voice, and tomorrow who is in favour of whom in this House. Thank you, Delara Burkhardt. Now for the Renew Group, Karen Melchior. Thank you. I will speak Danish. With this law, we can make sure we can have harmonization of packaging rules, reduce our use of single-use packaging. I would know to go through all the glass in the parks of Copenhagen because there aren't enough requirements, or all the single-use takeaway packaging. I don't want to go through Europe with deposit bottles in my packaging because the deposit systems aren't mutually recognized. We want to make sure that we don't destroy the possibilities for small enterprises because the requirements have moved from the producers to the distributors. I would like to thank Frederick Ries for the cooperation on banning PFAS in packaging, so we will ban these forever chemicals from our food. Remember tomorrow that the principle of do no harm should apply when we deal with the laws on our reuse and deposit systems in our single market. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Melchior. And now, for the Greens European Free Alliance Group, Grace O'Sullivan.
Colleagues, it shouldn't be a surprise to you that the junk food barons are not a reliable source of environmental advice, that lobbyists for plastic corporations are not authorities on sustainability. Yet here we are, debating whether we should or should not tackle the mountain of packaging waste piling up in our towns and cities, all because of the corporate embrace of throwaway single-use culture. And despite what those men in nice suits tell you, we cannot recycle our way out of this mess. If your single-use plastic cup is recycled into a single-use plastic bag, it is not sustainable. If your plastic junk is swapped for cardboard junk, it is not sustainable. And if we continue to generate levels of waste at current rates, that is by definition unsustainable. So, colleagues, we have to pull the brakes on our throwaway society. The empty cardboard shipping boxes, the single-serving shampoo bottle for your single-serving hotel experience, the plastic wrapping for a single piece of fruit. All this plastic is cheap. This cardboard is cheap. This packaging is cheap. But the price for our future is very, very high indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Sullivan. Silvia Sardoni. For the ECR group now, Pietro Fiocchi. And after that, Silvia Sardoni.
Thank you, President. Obviously, we do agree with the objective to reduce the amount of packaging and waste materials, in particular in the perspective of the need to reduce the amount of waste which is being taken to landfill. This is important for the whole of Europe, for environmental reasons, but also for economic reasons. On this regulation, which we talked about in the ENVI committee, there are 3 points I'm not very keen on. One of them is the fact it's a regulation rather than a directive. This means that member states don't have any room when it comes to choosing a different way of doing this, a different road forward. The fact is Italy and Belgium are very good when it comes to recycling of differentiated waste, others in other sectors. I'll continue. Evaluation impacts were produced, but I think they're a bit scanty. They don't really focus enough on the environmental, social, or even environmental aspects. So I think they should be done again. The minimum recycling rate or content, and this is something which the Commissioner, I think is important, is problematic. We've seen a very vast increase of 120 or 150% when it comes to materials in Europe, according to the Financial Times. So the problem here is that with the increase of transport costs, and we've been talking today about CO2 emissions and HGVs, together with increased costs for packaging. So the fact is, we are actually expecting European citizens to pay an enormous increase in prices in supermarkets. So that's ridiculous, that's crazy. The people of Europe don't understand this. Thank you.
Merci. Je passe la parole à Madame Silvia Sardone.
Thank you. The floor goes now to Silvia Sardone.
Il testo sugli imballaggi è un autentico.
This measure on packaging is absolute madness. You're going to push whole countries into crisis. Italy, for example, a model country when it comes to circular economy. We are European leaders, or indeed world leaders, when it comes to recycling. Italy achieved European objectives 7 years early. This has involved enormous investments between 2001 and 2021. 7 billion euros have been invested in separating waste and 4 billion when it comes to recycling and recovering materials. But once again, we're going to throw money away. We are using more and more plastic, increasing waste, damaging health, and increasing transport costs. We've also heard talk about food waste, but this is a bit schizophrenic. If we are to fight against food waste, people suggest we should be having smaller and smaller packages. There's no impact analysis of any of this, which would actually demonstrate in some cases a more important environmental impact from reuse, because sometimes the packaging has to go backwards and forwards. It has to be clean. That means we consume water and energy. And we'll also be closing down companies and leading to firing of workers. So let me just say this to you. Stop here. Don't go any further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just before I give the floor to the next speaker, I would like to announce that we have already 9 persons for the Catch the Eye, and I will all take them, but I close the list now for the Catch the Eye, and I give the floor to Mr. João Pimenta Lopes, please.
Obrigado, Sr. Presidente. É inegável a necessidade de reduzir o sobreembalamento.
Thank you, President. We have to reduce our waste, packaging waste, and we do need to be careful with the resources that we use. And single-use packaging as well will have to be reduced. There has to be, I mean, there is a cost which is passed on to the consumer at the end of the day. And there'll have to be administration and control at public level of the waste in all sectors. And we'll have to think about the efforts made in different member states, because we all have different starting points and we have different objectives. But all of this will have to be suited to each member state, of course. And we need to be flexible over time so that each member state can achieve its goals. And we need to do something for those states that have a low percentage of recycling to ensure that they are helped and given the right structures and infrastructure to do that.
Grazie, Commissario.
Thank you, Commissioner. Free water in restaurants, the possibility of reusing containers for food, stopping waste of packaging. Those are some of the advantages of this packing regulations for citizens. Recycling won't disappear, but recycling alone is not enough. We have to intervene at the source. We have to reduce the enormous quantities of waste. And to do this, we have to promote reuse. So recycled plastic in Italy is just 16%. What are you talking about? Excellence. Those are lobbies putting pressure on Italian members. This is indecent. I say to you, concentrate on the opportunities which we can see. New jobs, new industries. The idea of not negotiating a minimum recycling level. What about excellence? Where are we excellent? Maybe on paper, maybe on glass. And this will be at the cost of all those recycling sectors which work with plastic. MEPs and members of the Five-Star Movement are committed to the interests of our citizens, but we have to be interested in everyone's interests. We have to try to protect the interests of those, the weakest members of society.
Nächster Redner ist der Herr Kollege Peter.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Peter Liese.
Colleagues, we must fight the flood of plastic and waste. That's why we need a regulation. It's a single market for the circular economy. The member states who haven't got much recycling so far must do a lot more. But the Commission, I think, has overshot. This proposal has the spirit of Vice President Timmermans, even though he's not there. I'll give you 2 examples. First, online trade. We have a lot of superfluous packaging, a lot of plastic, but the proposal is on paper, which is treated in the same way as plastic. I know companies which are moving from plastic to paper. Shouldn't we support them? Secondly, much more annoying for me, the proposal from the Commission bans small bags made from paper for sugar, salt, pepper and confectionery. Colleagues, this morning, I had a coffee this morning, I got these little packages in Strasbourg. We can't seriously ban something to the public which we use ourselves. We can't seriously, where we have so many problems with paper bags, we can't be dealing with paper bags where we have so many problems. I think we will vote down this nonsense tomorrow. Then we'll have a good text. Let us make table amendments in that to that end. Thank you.
Next speaker is Ms. Sara Serdes, please.
Obrigada, Presidente. Comissário, colegas, o consumo dos...
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner. Now we see what is happening, and we see the increase in the packaging on a daily basis in the European Union. You know, each person produces about half a kilo, and this is just not sustainable and is having a negative impact on the environment. So solutions, innovative solutions need to be found for reuse so as to reduce the impact on the environment. And we have to create some form of recovery system for recycling and also invest in alternatives and more sustainable materials to replace plastic, for example. We need to, as consumers in member states, make sure that we cooperate and collaborate to work towards reducing the use of these plastics and this packaging to have a more sustainable and a healthier environment.
Next speaker is Ms. Elsi Katainen, please.
Kiitoksia, puhemies.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. It's very important that we bring down the growing amount of packaging waste in Europe. Practical solutions are needed, and separate collection must be improved. It's good that we've achieved big improvements on the Commission proposal. Despite this, the Environmental Committee position would weaken the efforts by industry for the circular economy. Current recycling problems have to do a lot with plastic. I can't accept that the EU is punishing the fibre-based material where recycling works and where we get valuable raw materials. No one is against reuse, but recycling must be an equal alternative alongside reuse. The Finnish bottle deposit system is an excellent example for the whole of Europe. At worst, because of strict demands and banning packaging, we will end up with more food waste. We haven't had a proper consideration of the objectives and the environmental impacts.
Frau Manuela Ripa.
Thank you. Next speaker is Manuela Ripa.
Warum diskutieren wir überhaupt erneut über ein...
Why are we talking yet again about a law on packaging and waste? Although 5 years ago we adopted a directive, the answer is quite straightforward. The quantity of packaging in the European Union has been exploding. The levels of packaging have reached record levels. This is why an update of this legislation is necessary. It's now our responsibility to ensure that we can find a solution which is good for both people and nature. In particular, we need ambitious objectives for avoiding waste and reusing packaging. Unfortunately, we've seen there's massive lobbying resistance against this. However, reuse having precedence over recycling is essential. This is important if we are to reduce our CO2 and other emissions, while at the same time reducing the plundering of our natural resources, the destruction of our environment, and the pollution of our air. We should finally do something to substantially reduce the mountains of waste in the European Union. Recycling alone is not enough. And, the legislation we're voting on now is better than the status quo, but it's still too weak. We, in our view, still have an important task. We must do more to ensure that we have a sustainable, environmentally friendly future for our packaging industry in Europe.
Zalewska, bitte.
Anna Zalewska.
Panie komisarzu, dobrze pan wie, że...
Commissioner, you know very well that I like you a lot and I respect you a lot, but I must start with a difficult proposal. I think you should see within the Commission who brought this draft, because clearly someone is trying to make money on something here, because the draft proposal, it throws into the bin dozens of years of education, of investment, of searching for solutions to actually have a closed-circuit economy. And suddenly there are solutions being imposed where we are supposed to deal with plastic that can no longer be recycled. We need to change Article 22, 26, and the articles which delegate or allow for the Commission to use delegated acts in such a manner and design in such a manner that, for example, the Commission has the time until the end of December to prepare a delegated act, and then it comes into force on the 1st of January. This is not the way that you legislate or you build economy. Let's be responsible. Let us amend this during the vote. Thank you very much.
Le prochain orateur, Monsieur Philippe Olivier.
Philippe Olivier is the next speaker. Thank you very much, President. Everybody wants to work against waste, useless waste and overconsumption. And obviously, we can only agree on reducing the packaging and these bags and so on. But the problem is implementing. It's all or nothing, as usual. You know, we get into this absurd making of rules and setting standards, you know, traditional things like the camembert packaging, which really are important for that product and for that brand, are being attacked. So we've found consensus, but there's a lack of nuance here. There's a lack of knowledge and a lack of elegance, a lack of savoir-vivre. And this is typical, really, of what the European Union is all about. It's bureaucracy, red tape that only knows about statistics and numbers and wants to just remove national identities. But we're talking about people here, people and countries with their own traditions. Francesca Donato is next speaker.
Questo regolamento sugli imballaggi.
This regulation on packaging and packages waste is part of a raft of measures for the European Green Deal, which have set themselves objectives such as doing away with fossil fuel vehicles, trying to reduce CO2 emissions in the atmosphere, and to try to help protect the climate. Those seem to be an excuse for the Commission to move forward at any cost, including the wide-scale destruction of industry throughout the European Union. This industry has guaranteed social progress and welfare for more than a century. Even countries which are more virtuous when it comes to recycling, such as Italy, will be forced to change their productive models within a very short phase of time so as to eliminate plastic. The proposal of reusing packaging for all consumer products, including foodstuffs, is economically non-sustainable and damaging for the environment, given the enormous waste of energy, water and detergent this would involve. Let's bring an end to these ideological crusades. Let's go back to what Europe's really about. Thank you.
Pascal Arimont.
Thank you. Pascal Arimont is the next speaker.
Thank you, Vice President. Commissioner, everybody produces each year about 177 kilograms of packaging. For my household, my wife and children, we produce over 700 kilograms of packaging. That's about the size of a large horse living in my kitchen. We're aware that we must bring this down. Everybody knows that packaging should be seen as a raw material that we don't burn, that we don't send to Asia, but which we reuse. But as often, we must be ambitious but feasible. The Commission text was too ambitious. We hear that in debate. The left says it's not enough. The right says it's all rubbish, to use that term. In the middle, we say that it must be feasible. I've talked about the practicalities with many companies. Many have said that it's not flexible enough, and we know a bit more time to create the recycling market. And our product for the packaging needs to be redesigned, and we need to have new packaging models designed. These companies have different worries apart from packaging, but they'll deal with it. But they say, make it feasible, make it flexible, because if you try to too much, it'll break down. Let's vote for it tomorrow so that we can vote, so we can meet in the middle, so that we can have a text which deals and brings down this mountain of packaging waste.
Thank you very much. Achille Variati has the floor.
Grazie, Presidente. Condivido.
Thank you, President. I share the fundamental points put forward by the Commission, who says that prevention must be at the very top of the hierarchy of waste, which underpins the whole proposal. Nevertheless, I do note that the Commission proposal does have some drawbacks regarding the ways in which we should achieve our objectives, in particular for those sectors such as the food sector, which have very specific characteristics. I would remind you that the current directive sets out the need for member states to bring about a major increase in terms of their recycling targets. Some countries, such as my own, did this with enormous efforts and investment. The current proposal, however, actually charts out the opposite way forward, setting out binding targets in terms of reuse, and the suggestion is that this would always be the best environmental choice, but this would be questioned because of the enormous amount of water this would involve. It's important that we show some courage in recognizing the efforts taken by certain member states in terms of recycling, while at the same time guaranteeing absolute food safety when it comes to the food our citizens consume.
Thank you. The floor goes to Max Orville.
Monsieur le Commissaire, chers collègues.
Commissioner, colleagues, each European generates about 189 kilos of waste packaging per year, and it's going up and up. So managing the waste is part of our planet's preservation plan. In this context, this regulation on packaging is an important step towards reducing waste. Revising the standards will allow us to be innovative in sustainable materials for packaging, and also in recycling, collection and reuse as well, where possible. But if this is to succeed, every citizen in every territory is going to have to be actively involved. So let's make sure that everybody really takes it on board. Spirits are in the overseas territories represent the excellence and knowledge and know-how of these territories, and they deserve special attention with regard to the reuse obligation for bottles. I'm not convinced that this is a measure that is really suited to our ultra-peripheral regions. So with the vote tomorrow, we can try and find the right balance between the environment and adopting functional rules.
Before we invented the so-called green policies, before we moved all production from Europe into China, Vietnam, and other countries, we used to have a few kilograms of packaging waste per capita. Now we have almost 200 kilos of packaging waste. We adopt legislation very frequently, but the fact is that we have growing mountains of waste. First, we tried to have a differentiated collection of waste. We have separate boxes for glass, for cardboard, for plastics. But what is the truth? From none of this waste is being recycled. The most plastics waste is only waiting in the storages in order to be transported somewhere or being taken to fire, and every fire is visible from the space.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident.
Ms. Niebler, thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. In Europe, the waste mountains are getting bigger. The reason for that is, one of the reasons is packaging material. 40% of the plastic and 40% of the paper and 50% of the plastic is packaging. And that's why we need this new regulation on packaging. I think what's good about this proposal is that from 2030 all packaging must be recyclable. I think this proposal is good. Secondly, that reuse and deposit systems must be built up in all member states. And thirdly, it's good that the share of recycling in plastic is being increased. What's not good is the bans for individual packaging formats. We're talking about sugar and cream for coffee. It's no sense in having labelling for beer bottles, etc. That has been corrected. It's important that this topic, which in certain member states has been set up and which serves these circular economy, that these can be maintained over years and decades. Circular systems have been built up, and that shouldn't be counted. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Niels Fuglsang.
Vi ved at drukne I.
We are drowning in waste and packaging, and it's going up. Since 2009, the amount of waste in Europe has gone up by 20%. Friends, I'm sick of all the plastic in nature and the water. I think many people are sick of it. Also Aarhus in Denmark, people are sick of it. And there's a system now where there are reuse cups instead of takeaway cups. If you get a cup in a restaurant in Aarhus, you have a deposit. There's a deposit system where you can deposit the cup and get the money back. So these cups are not thrown away in nature. If Aarhus can do it, we can do it throughout Europe. So let's get a law which phases out single-use plastic. Let's do something good, both for people and nature, and let's drop the exceptions which the plastic lobby wants to have. Let's get plastic out, and let's get nature and the environment in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Mr. Ivan Stefanek.
Dámy a páni, legislatíva o
Ladies and gentlemen, the legislation on packaging and packaging waste is an important milestone towards sustainable packaging economy in Europe. It affects every producer, distributor and consumer. What is a key factor is to emphasize level playing field for everybody. This legislation extends the obligations for manufacturers of drinks, including alcoholic drinks, but it shouldn't discriminate one from another. It is important for equal terms and level playing field to apply to everybody. The objective of 10% of reusable packaging and 25% by 2040 is achievable, and during this time we can fine-tune and fix all the deficiencies, and I think we shall set a level playing field for everybody at this stage, and I want to thank everybody who shared this opinion and support this draft.
Biljana Borzan.
Please. Ms. Borzan has the floor.
Zahvaljujem, gospodine. Thank you, Chair. Each of us generates 188 kilograms of waste. And in the last 10 years, the quantity of waste increased by 20%. We really need to start using the resources we have in a more intelligent way, and we need to protect our environment. In inflation times, products are placed in packagings to fool the consumers because the content is smaller. We need to stop this practice. There are the fake bottoms, unnecessary letters, or other sorts of packagings whose aim is to fool the consumers. Only when we return home, we realize that we made a mistake, and then it's already too late. With this legislation, we are going to solve this problem, and we will enable our consumers to get what they paid for.
Yeah, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. Our cheeses, our French cheeses, are loved throughout the world, but who can imagine a camembert or a Mont d'Or without its wooden packaging? Plastic wrapping would really be aesthetically unpleasing and makes no sense environmentally. What we're trying to do here is ensure that the internal market functions properly so that we can move towards sustainable wrapping and packaging. But, you know, we're talking about something that really guarantees the quality. So when we're talking about the scope, this has to be taken into account. There's other products as well, not just cheese, from other countries. Other products in other countries are facing the same dilemma. We need to protect our environment, but not to the detriment of the specificities of each member state. And, you know, this is working against their prosperity. So let's stop all this gold plating. Let's be more discerning in our legislation. César Luena is the next speaker.
Presidente, bueno, yo creo que tenemos un problema con los residuos.
Thank you, President. We clearly have a problem when it comes to packaging waste in the European Union. This regulation we're talking about addresses this problem. I think we've had good negotiations, good agreement, which combines ambition and flexibility. I think our society, and in particular in manufacturing industry, we have to make more efforts, first of all, to reduce the volume of packaging. Dear colleagues, we have to reduce the enormous numbers of unnecessary packaging. We have to promote reuse. We also have to improve recycling. We have to ensure that all packaging either goes back or is recycled. And finally, our citizens deserve more and better information. So we very much welcome mandatory labelling describing the origin of the packaging. Our citizens need this information. Certain sectors, wine, ceramics, fruit and vegetables and so on, need all of this. So I think when this regulation is finally adopted, I think it will be good news for the Green New Deal and for the European Union.
Thank you. Next speaker is Maria Spiraki.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Commissioner, dear colleagues, needless to say that we have to put an end on the dramatic increase of packaging waste generation. But at the same time, we have to take into account the concerns coming from the market. Various stakeholders raised the issue of effective implementation of packaging regulation. According to my opinion, it is critical to clear out that recyclable and reusable options are complementary. Opting for the more circular packaging model should be the key objective of this regulation. Definitions of recyclability and high quality of recycling still need to take into account both scientific evidence and the practical experience of well-functioning recycling system for certain materials. We can't deal with a circular model if it is not recognized all the associated benefits of packaging made of renewable material. For instance, it will allow bio-based packaging to fulfill its potential. Legal certainty is much needed also, without definition of composite packaging, of plastic packaging, to ensure compliance with the minimum recycled content targets in plastic packaging. Finally, it would also be important for food packaging or packaging used for food ingredients, especially when it comes to SMEs, that should not be subjected to reuse targets, as those cannot be properly sterilized to be reused in safe conditions and without incurring cross-contamination. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Ms. Mia Petra Kumpula-Natri.
Dear Chair, dear Commissioner, there is too much packaging and waste produced today. We, all consumers in the Union, we see that there are many good ways to reduce the waste. Through the packaging that is measured right, avoid mini-scale packaging, for example, in the hotels, recycling packaging materials so they don't end up on the waste fill, and then also circular economy can diminish needs for new materials through the reuse. Also, we can find it somewhere. Reuse doesn't fit everywhere, but there are ideas for that one also to be promoted. We have single-use plastic regulation in place, but it's very narrow. So I expected something more to come. But what we see now, that it was banning paper, it was banning composite, and actually what we see in McDonald's in France, adding plastic cups that comes from oil-based fossils, that is imported from outside of Europe and is not recyclable. So I hope the trialogues the best of luck not to replace reusable, renewable paper and composite with the plastic that is now happening. Good luck.
Thank you very much. We are now coming to the Catch the Eye, and as I said, we can take all the colleagues, and we're beginning mit Frau Hildegard Bentele.
Ja, sehr geehrter Herr Kommissar Sinkevicius, Sie haben zu
Commissioner Sinkevicius, we said that our goal is to bring down packaging waste by having multi-use options. It's important to have standardized life cycle analysis. There's many studies. Every producers have their own studies with the wished for results. To the Commission, which have listened to Roberta Torvalds on life cycle analysis, make sure that your analysis are based on a comparable scientific basis, and then we can have a better debate.
Domnule comisar, stimați colegi, totdeauna am susținut ca obiectivele ambițioase să fie armonizate.
I've always said that we have to harmonize ambitious objectives with the reality on the ground. Of course, we should want to try and reduce packaging waste. However, the quantity of waste and packaging is proportionate to the quantity of food or products that we're consuming. So excessive consumption is the problem, and we're aware of that, Commissioner, colleagues. We should take into account in our regulation the recommendations of those who know what this is all about. Amendment 417, for example, provides for exemptions for high-performing packaging, and not all packaging is adapted to all products. We need to take that into account, and tomorrow when we vote, we need to be aware of these differences, and we need to improve on the Commission's proposal because they weren't 100% objective nor realistic.
Ms. Beata Mazurek.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen. I can see the need to update the existing rules so that we can effectively fight with excessive waste from packaging. But the direction chosen is a right one, yes, but the pace at which it is supposed to be implemented and the overambitious objectives, it all renders it impossible to implement. Please note that in the draft we are lacking reference to various circumstances in particular member states. The new objective should be realistic in the first place, should be measurable, doable, feasible technically, while following the idea of sustainable development. So we should also take into consideration social aspects and economic aspects. And member states must be given leeway with respect to extended responsibility of producers, deposit schemes and waste management. I also warn you against additional red tape, which will be negative for businesses. That's something that we should remember as well. Actually, many of those burdens included there are totally superfluous if packaging is collected and recycled adequately. Thank you.
Ms. Susanna Ceccardi.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. When I hear that the European Commission has set itself high ambitions, I get scared. I would prefer to see slightly less ambitious programmes with a bit more firmly rooted in reality, a bit more balanced. I'm delighted to be a member of the European Parliament, and together with my colleagues, I've spent years explaining to my fellow citizens how they should go about sorting their waste and why it's a good thing. Now, lots of countries have achieved their objectives on recycling. Now we're being told, no, let's change everything. Let's force the citizens of Europe to change their habits. And above all, let's cause a real production problem. Not to mention the food industry, farming, catering. Either because of bad faith or because of ignorance, they've created an enormous threat to these industries, undermining the European economy, the Italian economy. We're talking about 600 million euros of euros a year, 1.3 million companies with hundreds or millions of employees. Let's think carefully about this.
Thank you very much, President. The Killarney Coffee Cup project is an amazing voluntary initiative by small businesses in the southwest of Ireland. They recently implemented a project that now includes over 50 businesses moving away from single-use coffee cups. Before the project started, Killarney was throwing away 1 million cups per year. Louise Byrne from the Killarney Coffee Cup project said, "Often packaging and single-use items are not recycled or composited, they simply become general waste. Even if this waste source was managed correctly, it's only in use for an average of 13 minutes. Considering the impact associated with deforestation, water-stressed manufacturing, transportation and waste management," she said, "I don't think its use justifies its existence." She said, "I would argue that watering down goals and policies sends the wrong message to people about political priorities and the true global risk of climate change. However, yet again, the EPP have joined forces with the far right to do exactly that, to water down ambition at the behest of the private packaging industry. Pretty sad."
Et nous passons à Monsieur Marc Tarabella, s'il vous plaît.
Mark Tarabella, please.
Mettre en place un pacte vert européen.
The European Green New Deal is an important priority. Some people are stubborn in saying that it's all going well and that everything will turn out well in the end. That's simply not true. Amongst all these measures, those we've been trying to roll out so as to ensure that future generations have a chance of surviving, new rules in the European Union regarding packaging, and de facto efforts to fight against packaging at its source. All of those are important. On average, every European, as we've heard, generates 188 kilos of waste per year. That's enormous. That's 11 kilos more than last year, which says a lot and demonstrates that new legislation is necessary. Given that so many companies simply fail to understand that the planet's resources are not inexhaustible and that they always put their own profits ahead of general interest, we now have no choice other than to impose strict rules. Some might say that nobody else is doing this around the world. I would say to them, you have to start somewhere. And if Europe can be a pioneer when it comes to recycling, I think we should be proud of it.
Beaucoup. La prochaine oratrice.
Thank you. The next speaker, Ms. Glavak.
Hvala lijepo, predsjedavajući. Thank you, Chair. Today we are facing a huge challenge, a challenge that will define our generation, management of packaging and packaging waste. We are all aware of the fact that the quantity of waste increased from 66 million tons in 2009 to 70 million tons of waste only 10 years later. We need a clear legislation and legal certainty, and we need to involve all relevant stakeholders, including the e-commerce. But we have to be careful with producers. This means that we need to promote packaging which can be recycled, but also the development of infrastructure for recycling and reuse. We need to create an economy which will safeguard our planet. However, we have to be realistic and achieve what is doable today. And we have to say it clearly, the circumstances are not the same in all EU member states. Therefore, we need packaging which will make our planet greener, but at the same time, we need to clearly define our priorities.
Ms. Clara Aguilera.
Muchas gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President. There's no doubt about it. This is a very important debate. Our objective is something which we will share. This is essential. And we have to ensure that Europe be a pioneer on this. However, what we have to do is to ensure that we can balance the ambition of these objectives, and they are indeed very ambitious, with the reality which European businesses face. Many European businesses have been investing in research for years now so as to improve recycling. They shouldn't be penalised for that now. We have set ourselves an objective of reuse, but we should also continue to promote a high percentage of recycling. At the same time, in the Agriculture Committee, we've tried to find consensus so as to push through certain reforms in these proposals regarding the food chain. We want to use these amendments so as to ensure that we can continue to guarantee food security, the traceability of foodstuffs in full knowledge of their origins as well. And we should also avoid food waste. And sometimes reuse of packaging doesn't always help us do that.
Rosanna Conte.
Oltre 700 imprese a rischio.
More than 700 companies are at risk and many thousands of jobs. This will have a negative impact on more than 30% of Italians. Those are just some of the side effects of this absurd regulation for Italy, which has achieved a recycling rate of 73.3%, many years before the objective set up by the European Union. But this isn't enough, however, in the face of this preposterous proposal, which focuses so much on reuse. We haven't talked much about the reuse of use of water, detergent, damage and transport, as well as the conserving and food safety of many foodstuffs, salads, fruit, packaging for hotels, sports, not to mention the impact on the catering and drink sector. The impact of this, is it proportionate with the efforts? No, not at all. All of this is wrong. In the vote tomorrow, we have to try to re-establish a balance between the need to reduce packaging and related waste and the demands of producers.
The next speaker is Mr. Sean Kelly.
I come from Killarney. My native town is the tourist capital of Ireland, and I'm very pleased to see reference to it by my colleague here today. There's a very active Tidy Towns committee there, including, I'm pleased to say, my wife, people like Johnny Maguire, Carmel Foley, Padraig Tracy, Louise Burdens and former councillor Mick Leeson. And they saw that in Ireland, that 200 million coffee cups in a population of 5 million were being used every year. The majority of these weren't recycled, weren't even composted, they went to landfill. And they said they'd do something about it. And the local community, now over 50 businesses and growing, are now having a cup which is reusable, which they all adhere to, saving a lot in terms of waste, and particularly giving good example to society at large. Those cups, which were up until now used 13 minutes was their lifespan. This can be reused and honoured as they go along. I think there's a huge example here that people themselves, even if there's no legislation, will do something which has benefited to society and benefit particularly in eliminating waste.
Thank you very much. And then we continue with the Commissioner, Commissioner Virginijus Sinkevičius. Please, the floor is yours.
Honourable members, let me start with the very positive. First of all, truly thank you for your contributions, because they clearly show that we all seriously concerned about the rapid, unsustainable growth in packaging waste. We also understand that our task to set the framework for a resource-efficient packaging sector is a truly challenging one. The linear system of take, make, throw away has been vested itself deeply in our production and consumption patterns, and it will take considerable efforts and a change in mindset to bend the curve towards the circular economy for packaging. So we must ensure that the measures with significant implications for businesses are stretching but proportionate, that there is sufficient time for the transition, and that SMEs are not overburdened. Both citizens and businesses expect us to act with ambition and realism. And we are determined more than ever to work together to ensure that all concerns are addressed. And the Commission is here to help and discuss. Let me come back briefly on a few individual points that I think are extremely important to address. First of all, prices for consumers. I heard quite a few statements on prices for consumers. I ask you to use your common sense. All this shiny new packaging that we fill our bins with, 190 kilograms per year, this costs money to deal with. So we estimated that with our measures that we have on the table, consumers will actually save 100 euros per person per year. In action, if we continue with the same scenario as we have now, would cost 6.4 billion relative to 2030. And that's cost for the economy, for the society, for the environment. Very simple. Less waste, less resources, less costs. And that's good for both citizens and the environment. I've heard also quite a few remarks as regards the impact assessment. That it's not sound, that there is no impact assessment. I want to reassure you that impact assessment was done a very careful one, and that the reuse targets lead to a decrease of water consumption and a reduction of CO2 emissions of 1.25 million tons in 2030. The Commission is fully aware that some LCAs with a specific scope on certain sectors and based on arbitrary model assumptions can come with different results. The Commission proposal, though, acknowledges the role of single-use packaging, and thus our proposal foresees a coexistence of both systems established in a way to reap the maximum economic and, of course, environmental benefits. Now, on reuse, the architecture of the Commission proposal builds on improvement of both reuse and recycling, and we cannot be naive that with these growing numbers of waste that we can recycle our way out of it. I'm very sorry to take a bit more time, but I think it is extremely important to reply to the questions that the members of the Parliament have put forward. The last thing, which was very sensitive, on some of the packaging of some of the cultural heritage. So indeed, in the EU, certain food packaging made of wood, textiles, ceramics are placed on the market in a very small quantities, and many of them protected by the food quality legislation. So the Commission is aware that such packaging may have difficulties to be recycled at scale and is open for specific exemptions, notably where certain packaging materials or formats are required for specific food and products. Finally, honourable members, let me assure you, there will be no compromises when it comes to food safety. And we duly analyse the measures to avoid any increase of food waste. And when it comes to the impacts on the producers of single-use packaging, let me recall you that our approach foresees a coexistence. Single-use packaging will not disappear. Our analysis concludes that volumes for cardboard and paper-based single-use packaging will flatline at the levels they reached a few years ago. So there is no disruption in a business case, because when the regulation kicks in, production levels would be still higher than a decade ago. Honourable members, I think we are united in the task. We must do more to reverse the rising tide of packaging waste, and we must do it as soon as possible. Most importantly, this will benefit the environment, reduce pollution, and safeguard our single market. Let's listen to our citizens and provide solutions. And the Commission is there to do its utmost to support agreement in the coming months. And of course, I count on you, and I trust we can make it. Sorry for taking a bit more time.
Thank you, Commissioner, for answering the colleagues' questions. And now we come to the rapporteur, Niels Torvalds.
Mr. President, dear Commissioner, with the Commissioner we have been fighting on many issues before, and usually we find solutions at the end of the day. That was happened last week, and it will happen this week, and will happen next week. But I think we should be honest about one thing. This Commission has produced twice the amount of legislation the previous Commission did. And that actually led to a situation where we are running again with the Commissioner in seconds blank to the next meeting, trying to find new solutions on other problem. At the same time, we know that everybody has been working under severe time constraints. And severe time constraints also influenced the way in which the impact assessment was done. So And that was seen by the rapporteur Ries in the very beginning when she tried to find a solution on Article 26, and just to sort of accommodate the goals of the Commission with the reality of the industry. On other important points, we support the Commission's ambitions. Obligation to recycle packaging by 2030, application of extended responsibility principle on packaging, harmonizing labeling, introduction of deposit and return systems, and promotion of recycled content in plastic packaging. Such profound changes toward a circular economy don't happen overnight. And Fredrik Ries has put all her energy and experience into ensuring that the European Parliament votes within the short time frame to make this regulation or something feasible for the economic operators. Circular economy of packaging will help decouple economic development from the use of natural resources, contribute to achieving climate neutrality by 2050, and reduce the EU's economic strategic dependency on many materials. Harmonized rules are key to remove the barriers for business selling packaging in several member states or across the EU caused by differing rules between the different member states. But I think we have to acknowledge also one thing. During the COVID-19 epidemic, we actually learned a different way of behaving. And when human beings learn a different way of behaving, it's very difficult to unlearn people from this behavior. So that's the project we have in front of us. The path mapped out is the right one. It's up to the plenary session tomorrow to confirm this approach, and then we see how we manage together with Commissioner Sinkevicius the rest of the battle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rapporteur, and the debate is now closed, and the vote, as you said, will be held tomorrow. The minutes of yesterday's sittings and the text adopted are available. Are there any comments? No? Then the minutes are approved. I have to make a small announcement pursuant to Rule 158, paragraph 2, on a proposal from the President and with the agreement of the political groups. I would like to inform the House that due to the length of the voting session, the sitting on Wednesday is extended to 11 p.m. We will now move to the debates, and we are coming to a very interesting